Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of the Mother Drive. As you know, I usually record in my car, but today my husband took the car. So we're here in the office. I am here with Jill Lerman, who is a parenting expert. She is a coach that is the owner of a company called The Art of Playful Parenting. That is correct, right, Jill? Or is the podcast called The Art of Playful Parenting?
That's actually the podcast, is The Art of Playful Parenting. My business is Jilly Beans NYC. And then in that business, I have my membership, my coaching, all that stuff is kind of under the umbrella. Yeah.
Question for you, Jill.
Yeah.
I remember, okay, so for those of you, small backstory for side quest backstory that we're going to do here. Jill and I have known each other for many years.
Yes.
I feel like I remember Jilly Beans from like 10 years ago. Is that true?
Yeah. So
Please,
I don't know.
because
I don't know if it was quite 10 years, but when the first iteration of my business was teaching in-person play-based classes and doing play-based events in and around Manhattan, I kind of took all my teacher tools, which we'll get into, and kind of translated into an in-person business where I would help facilitate play experiences and like teach parents and caretakers how they could do things like this at home. And that was Jilly Beans. And that was like a mobile business. And then everything pivoted March 2020, like so many different businesses, into the iteration of it that I know as Jilly Beans today.
Amazing. Because like we'd been trading emails. I was like, oh my God, that is so familiar.
Yes.
Like, why do I remember that? That's a long time ago. And then, so anyways, so I wasn't sure. Anyway, whatever. We've worked it out. So as she referenced briefly, is a parenting coach. She's an early childhood educator. She's a play expert and a mom of a toddler. She empowers overwhelmed parents and caretakers to connect and engage with their little ones through simple invitations to play and create to help make parenting feel more joyful and manageable. She also serves as a play expert and consultant for brands, where she teaches classes, runs workshops, consults for product development, and provides play ideas. As a mom herself, Jill knows how difficult it is to get through the day-to-day, which is why, above all else, her approach makes it easy for parents to facilitate interaction and play that supports development. I love this. I really do. And when I saw that you were creating independent play opportunities, I was like, that is so amazing, because I think a lot of people are really caught up in the let me play with my child.
Yes.
And I have to play with my child, and I feel guilty if I'm not playing with my child.
Oh, yes.
All those things.
Yeah.
Just a quick side note. I read this book called Bringing Up Baby.
Yes. I read it as well. Book. Fantastic
so
book.
Good.
Yeah.
So
that's
good.
A huge influence on a lot of my work with families and for my parenting style personally as well.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. I was wondering if it was one of the influences in the birth of this business. But yeah, we could talk a little bit about that in a bit, but I want to get started. So Jill, we'll first just get started with a little bit about your background journey and how you ended up becoming a parenting coach. I know you touched on it briefly, but give me some deets.
Yeah, sure. So I was working in early childhood education, teaching in private preschools in Manhattan. And while doing that, I taught first-time separation, so the young toddler classes in the preschool, as well as in the parenting centers of those schools. So teaching, the mommy and me and kind of some of the feeder programs into children that would maybe eventually become students at the preschools. And I just fell in love with play. And that really became my passion, and just watching amazing things happen at the hands of a child when you would put out materials and play objects in a thoughtful way and then just let them run with it. And I also fell in love with just helping parents and caretakers in this season of life find community and find support, and providing tools that maybe made getting through the day a little bit easier. So that was how my original business started. I started as kind of like a side hustle to my classroom work, where I would teach these play-based classes, doing just that, helping show, parents and caretakers how they could facilitate play at home using things they already had. How do I take this toy and use it in multiple different ways so I'm not constantly having to buy new stuff? How do I use kitchen utensils and, random material that I have to facilitate and support development? And then that translated into, doing events in stores and play spaces. And it just kind of grew from there. And it was going great. And then March of 2020 happened, and my life and all of our lives as we knew it were going to change. I also found out I was pregnant with my daughter the week New York City shut down. So it was a lot of like, oh gosh, like what is going to happen from here in every facet of life. And I finished my school year virtually, which was interesting with toddlers, as I know you probably understand on the parenting side. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, now what with my business? Going around to places with shared materials, that's not happening for the foreseeable future. But I saw an opportunity to take the things that I was doing in those classes and share them virtually, because parents they were their child's parent, they were their child's teacher, they were also working their own jobs, many of them. And I was like, you know what? Play can support these families, and these simple things can now have a whole new importance. So I started to share on Instagram. And that was how it kind of started to take this pivot to virtual. A lot of the brands whose stores I had been teaching in were looking to create virtual community to support their customers. So I started teaching virtual classes and doing lives as a play expert for a lot of these different companies. And that's how that iteration of my work started. And as it continued to grow, and then as I became a mom myself and my daughter, got here, I started to realize that like all these things I thought were simple were not quite simple enough for me as a mom. I was like, you know what? Less time to set up, less time to clean up, pare down, pare down, pare down. And I felt like I had just a whole new lens on the experience of the families that I was working with when I was in the trenches myself. So as my business has continued to evolve and my work with clients one-on-one, supporting them in play and parenting and my membership, all these things, it's always happening through the lens, not only of my teaching expertise and those tools, but also the lens of being a parent myself and being in it, and just knowing for me what has felt doable and what has felt overwhelming. And that's kind of how I try to approach everything in my work now.
It's amazing. So as you were speaking, I was thinking about this transition that you made from being a play expert, not having any children, and just being, in the trenches as a teacher with children and that
Yes.
experience as an
Yes.
individual.
Yes.
And now you have transitioned to being a mom as well. So
Yes.
when you think about your set of experiences teaching ahead of becoming a mother
Mm.
versus now as a mother, was there anything where you were like, well, shit, I had that wrong? Or like, damn, I didn't realize that, in that moment where you're
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe actually this is really, I thought it was so different than it was,
Yep.
in the terms of the
Yeah.
parental experience.
Oh,
Because as a
yeah.
teacher, obviously, the other thing is that I noticed that, like, and you notice this, I'm sure, your kid is a different person with their teacher than they are with, you, right? And there's this
100%.
emotional, messy, and all that stuff. So what
Yeah.
what was the thing for you, or was there something for you where you were like, I really need to, I really
Yeah.
need to figure that out?
Oh yeah, no question about it. I would just say, I always thought of myself as being someone who was really sensitive and empathetic to the parents of the students I taught, and really tried to connect. And really, to me as a teacher, and this is true now as a parent too, we're all on the team of this child, right? So it's really important that the communication be there and that we're all kind of working together to support the needs. And I always felt that way. But what I will say, just to give you one example, my daughter started school for the first time last year. And I had, I've helped hundreds of families navigate the transition of first time separation. That's my jam. I had all the tools. I had all the things. What I understood in a whole new way that I never could have understood, even though I tried, was you're quite literally taking your heart and a part of your heart and putting it in the hands of someone else when you leave your child in someone else's care in that way. And I just, the flooding of emotions that came with that, as much as I tried to understand it and empathize, I understood it in a whole new way as a parent. And it really made me think, like, gosh, I remember even being like, oh gosh, like, why, they're crying, and like their emotions are then affecting their child's emotion, all these things. And I'm thinking it from this practical standpoint, and then going through it, I'm like, their hearts were quite literally being torn from their chests. It was like, it is physical pain.
Mhm.
And the fear of, like, will they be loved? Will they be cared for? Will people be kind to them? Will they be kind to other people? All the flooding of all of those things just became so real to me. And I actually, funny enough, it's tomorrow. But I'm teaching a master class on starting school that I had taught in the past, but I added in a whole other element to the outline based on this, because I just felt like I understood it in a totally new way and with a totally different perspective once I went through it. And so that's one thing that comes to mind. And then, I'm thinking again, just like simplicity. I thought things that I used to facilitate were simple. And then when I became a parent, I was like, it's still too much. It's still too much setup. It's still too much cleanup. It doesn't need to be this complicated to be impactful. And I just find myself constantly paring down and doing less, but still seeing how impactful those, more simplistic ways of setting out play can be. Um, and lastly, there's so many more, but the last one that comes to mind in this moment is just, I think on some level, I don't want to say judgment, but I definitely had a belief system around what it meant to engage with your child that has changed a lot since becoming a parent myself. And it informs the work that I do now with families. I think there's a lot that we're fed about play being the only language of connection that we have with our children. And what I've come to realize as a parent, and as I continue to grow as an expert in this area, is that that is one way, but that there are many ways, and that play really changes when we're involved in it with our child. So if we want to really create these opportunities for them to be problem solvers, and for them to have more emotional resilience, and for their creativity, we have to change our involvement in the way that we engage with them, and instead look for other connection opportunities in addition to play, so that we don't, one, feel the constant pressure that you described to be like the cruise ship director, and two, that we really give them the chance to do what is their work. So I think that has just changed, and really my thought process on that has grown a lot from my days in the classroom, where I too kind of looked at play as like, that is the language of connection. And now I'm like, okay, that is one of many languages of connection.
Yeah. I do agree with that. That definitely everything you said. But the fact that children are fluent in so many different languages of connection. There's
Yes.
play, there's just the way they look at you, there's
Yes.
touch, there's just all the things, right?
Yes.
Their voice,
Yes.
their breath,
Yeah.
there's so many things. It's just even observing them and the way that they're
Yes.
interacting. independently with the world and
Hmm.
others, it's
Hmm.
really a beautiful, process to watch unfold. And
100%.
yeah, I'm I myself, in my work with kids, there's a lot of observing, you
Yeah,
know.
it's a huge part of my work too. It was as a teacher also. I mean, I taught primarily, like the longest stretch of my teaching was in a Reggio inspired school, and that informs a lot of my work. But that's a very child-led approach to education. And our job as teachers in a Reggio inspired classroom, in part, is to be observers, active observers, I like to call it, because you're still involved. I think there's a difference between, we're kind of mindlessly scrolling or doing our own thing while our child plays and we kind of look over versus kind of really actively watching what they're doing. But I think that's very different than you being down on the ground with them, kind of correcting or trying to give advice. Oh, your tower's not staying up. Well, you could do this, right? That's very different than me kind of watching this process happen and watching the child troubleshoot through that, and maybe offering like it's not staying up. I wonder what you could do, right? Providing scaffolding as opposed to like solving it for them. Um,
Right.
it's also about like curating the environment, right? And how are we putting things out? How are we kind of setting up this
For
child to
play.
have like, yeah, to have an engaging play experience. But I think the observation is so key. And it gives you, certainly in play, but just so much information, period, about who our child is, how they interact with the world, what's their learning style, what's their connection style, right?
Hmm.
When we just kind of sit back and watch, we can learn so much about our children.
What would you say? You talked about paring down, making it simple.
Yep.
What would you say is your biggest like tips slash strategy for parents in terms of paring down and keeping it simple?
Yeah. So I think that one is that we're kind of in this like age of consumerism. And look, I fall prey to it too. But I think, we're constantly being fed all the things that our child needs. Right. And it, it's just not true. I think that, especially when it comes really to life, but to play, less is more. If you want to see more play happening, you want to have less stuff. And it's more about what things are available than having more things available. So when I work with families, I have kind of my checklist, like when we're either looking maybe to do a cleanup, or it's the same kind of thing that you could even use when you're thinking about whether or not to purchase something. And some of the questions that I ask are, how open-ended is this toy or this object? Meaning, how many different ways can it be played with? Is it one and done? Is this like I press a button, it lights up, it plays a song? Okay, now what? Right? When we look at the things that we have available and we see something that could have lots of different ways of being interacted with as our child grows, versus there's kind of only one way to utilize this. It's not to say that those things can't have a purpose or a time, but that's not really the kind of stuff that we want to be investing in. We really want to think about how many different ways can this be utilized? Is this something that can only be played with one way? Are there possibilities? Another thing that I like to consider is, do I have a place for this to go? I think we often don't think. I mean, look, I live in an apartment, like the space is so limited, but I think even when you live in a larger space, space is always limited. And, really thinking about, is there a place for this, not only for it to actually physically fit, but is there room for my child to actually use it? And I think often when we really look at that, the answer is no, there's not. And then that maybe changes the direction of whether or not something stays or whether you purchase it. I also like to think about like, is this something that, is can be used inside and outside, right? And that also often takes some creativity from us too. Like one of my favorite play tips is to take what you think is an inside toy outside, because what happens is like magic, right? First of all, it becomes very engaging to our child, just the novelty of it being somewhere different. But you take magnetic tiles outside and like the sun shines through them and makes these incredible colors on the ground. And, there are just all these things, different shadows. There's just things that we don't think about until we change the environment. So I always like to ask that question, like, does this have to live here or could it live in many different places? So those are just a couple of examples, but I think that when we really start to look at the quality of the things that we have, and look at it through that lens, we start to realize like how many of these things are actually functioning for my child, and if they aren't, maybe they don't stay here, and they're going to be either rotated out or donated, or whatever that might look like.
So I noticed when I was a kid, thinking back, way back, I noticed that I always would love to take regular items from the house that my mom was using or my dad was
Yep.
using
Yep.
and take it outside. And she would be constantly like, "Where did my spoons go? They're all gone." And I'm out in the backyard digging with these
Yep.
spoons. And
Yep.
she never got mad, but she always knew there would be like the backyard would just be littered with spoons because
Oh
I was
yeah.
out there with all the
Yep.
different size spoons, digging
Yep.
different holes. And in my mind, of course, all this, burying rocks and whatever else was going on, as
Yeah.
a small child. And
Yeah.
um, I didn't care about the plastic shovel that she
Yep.
got me to do.
Yep.
No, I wanted the metal spoon from the
Totally.
cutlery
That's
drawer,
right. Well, children, they want to use, I think that that's a very, what you're describing is such like a universal thing, which is that children want to be active members of society. They
They
want to
do.
feel like active parts and participants of their day-to-day lives, of their family. And so they are often much more interested in household items because those are the things they're seeing you use, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I think there's like something to that, but there also is an open-endedness to the items you're describing that just leaves tons and tons of possibility. I mean, my favorite as a kid, my sister and I always joke about this because like now I do this for work and I so was this child. But like you're describing, mine was measuring
Oh my
cups
God,
and
I
coasters.
love a measuring cup.
Like,
Yes.
right? Like amazing. And my daughter too, like also. But I would even, sometimes it was like in the sense, like I would use them for scooping and pouring and transferring or digging, like you
Hmm.
described. Sometimes it was like in dramatic play where they were in my play kitchen and I was using them, emulating
Yeah.
some of the things I'd seen. But other times I was just talking to myself, walking around like the basement of our house, like our playroom, and telling myself stories while I kind of like clicked them together and banged them
Hmm.
together. And it was just like a place to put physical energy while my mind was going.
Hmm.
And like that, I was that kid. So, like,
Yeah.
I think that there's so many possibilities in items like that that it makes sense to me why they're so attractive to children. One of my
Yeah.
go-tos is like with my daughter now, and even in like my membership, I love like a mixing bowl, a spoon, like
Oh, yeah.
tongs, and something, right? And water. And
My daughter doesn't even
like,
have to put something in it.
yeah,
She's just stirring
yes,
the empty bowl.
yeah,
And
that's
I'm like,
right. And it's amazing how
amazing.
engaged a child will stay with that. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, but like that's not going to actually occupy them. I'm like, try it. Like you
Yes,
will
it will.
see. And we'll bring it
Yes.
upstairs and like all the kids in our building will come over and want to do it. I'm like, we got to get more bowls. I'm like running downstairs, like bringing up more mixing bowls. But like, do not underestimate the power
Or of a
of
mixing bowl or a
a
spoon
mixing
or a
bowl.
measuring cup.
That's right.
Yep. No doubt. Okay. So becoming a mom, right? You're someone who was doing these classes, and then you transitioned into being a mom. Um, what was your biggest challenge as you became a mom? Like what, it doesn't have to be with play, but just
Mm,
in general, what was
yeah.
your biggest challenge as a new mom?
Yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind was my daughter was a 2020 baby. So there was just I think there's a lot of isolation as a new parent at any time. And
Mm-hmm.
then there was just this added isolation and lack of village, just because of what was happening in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely was, a difficulty, and just like having to think about these things that you never imagine having to think about, like even with like letting family visit, and are we potentially endangering each other? Like just these things I never thought I'd have to think about on top of everything else. That was definitely, really difficult, and having to make those calls and consider those things. But I think the biggest struggle for me, and I still struggle with it now to a certain degree, is just that like I like control. I like order. I was I'm an anxious person by nature, and kind of a type A person by
Mm-hmm.
nature. And I have a lot of tools to help myself with that. And part of that is, kind of having a plan. And with children, you can have a plan and they laugh at your plan. And I think one of my really big struggles in the beginning was just this, like, I couldn't find order in it. And I was craving routine, and I was craving some predictability, and there just wasn't any. And especially as someone who, freelances, it's like I was counting on naps were work times for me. And when we were going through like the 4 month, progression, and naps were like 18 minutes long. And I'd like pee and eat and then sit down, and then she was up, and it just was like throwing me in a major way that I just couldn't get into a routine and a rhythm. And even now, there's so much more predictability, with a 3 and change-year-old than there was then. But the reality is that like children are not robots, right? And you could plug in all the right things, do all the right things. I come with a lot of tools because of my work, and they help immensely. But at the end of the day, even with all those things, some days are just harder than others. Our children are people. Some days they're more moody than other days. Some days you don't sleep well and it affects you, or you're not feeling 100% and it affects you, and it changes things. And, I think my biggest difficulty has just been in the ability to be flexible and kind of roll with it, because it goes against my nature. And I think that's been a place that I really have had to do a lot of work, and continue to work. I think I'll work on it forever, because we're always
Mm-hmm.
growing and learning. But yeah, I think that was probably the biggest thing, is just being like, thrive in predictability and
Yeah.
routine, and I have none. Like, it's hard.
And you speak of now she's a little bit older, right? So there's a little bit more predictability, but you are right. It doesn't matter how old they get. They can be 18,
Yep.
25.
Yep.
You can still like it. My mom said, I'll never forget this. My mother, just before I had Declan, she said to me, because I said to her, I'm worried that I won't wake up and in the middle of the night. Like, what if he's crying and I don't hear him? And she said, your hearing after you have this baby is never going to be the same again.
What's so
Never.
true.
She said,
It's so true.
and at that time she was in, I think she was in her early 60s. No, wait, she was in her mid to late 60s. And she said to me, I still hear you when you come and visit and the door cracks and you are a grown woman now about to have a child and the door opens at 2:30 in the morning, I still
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah.
Never goes away.
Yeah.
And I was, part of me could not believe that, right?
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
was just like, I don't really think that's true, mom. Dismissed. And then I had him and I
Yeah.
could not sleep.
Yes.
For love nor money, this child, I could hear his breathing.
I
And
know.
I was like, what is
I know.
going on?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like the whimper, like the slightest whimper in the
Anything.
night, I know. It really is crazy. And I'm like laughing as you're telling this about your mom because it's like I would have been like, you're crazy. And then
I literally said that to her. I was like, you're out of my mind. You're like, I could sleep through the alarm, the subway, like whatever, right? Like the sirens.
Yeah.
I have not slept the same, and he's going to be 11 this week,
Yeah.
and I have not slept the same since. And you know what? Even when I've gone away on vacation,
Yeah.
I still like my body is just now programmed,
I know. I know.
and it's a forever change thing.
It is. It's
Um,
a trip. It really is.
it really is a trip. But yeah. So speaking just to the things that change, sleep, unpredictability, all that stuff is
Yeah.
definitely a thing.
Oh yeah.
What do you think has been the most challenging experience from a client perspective that you've had to go through
Mm.
with a client to help them manage, deal with, and like how did that experience like inform your process moving forward?
Oh yeah. Well, one thing that comes to mind that I would say is kind of a theme with a lot of my clients is just like reparenting ourselves. And just how so often, having our children, we get very focused on our children's behaviors and how do we, we need tools and strategies and things to help support them, and they need regulation tools, and they need and they need and they need. And yes, many of those things are true. But what has come up again and again and again, and I know certainly comes up for me personally, is just how much our own stuff comes up when we're parenting. And I think with many of the clients I work with, that we're just, we get this opportunity to really look at ourselves, and that it really is not enough. If you really want to change the environment in your home, if you really want to cultivate a certain energy in your home and in your family, it's about more than just having strategies to manage your child's behavior. It's about your family as a whole. And very often it's about having tools for yourself. It's part of why, oops, as I hit the mic, it's part of why I am so, fascinated by and interested in a lot of the work that you're doing, because I think it's so incredibly important that we also have tools for ourselves as parents, in addition to the tools that we're trying to provide our children with. So I would say that that's something that comes up a lot. It's just people kind of being faced with their own things. Sometimes that's because of maybe experiences they had growing up. If you have a very difficult time tolerating your toddler's big feelings, I know for some of my clients, it's like, well, in my house, that was not tolerated. So we've sort of then become conditioned where our body goes into this like fight or flight of like, this is bad, shut it down, because that's always how we experience those things growing up, right? So that's just one example, but I think that's something that comes up a lot, and that requires a lot for often the mom is who I'm working with, to then do and take on and face. And then I would say another really big challenge is screen detoxing. Um, we were actually just talking a little bit about this before we even started recording, but our children are growing up in a different world than we grew up in, with different access. That brings a lot of really wonderful things, and it also brings a lot of scary things. And I think a lot of families that come to work with me are looking to pull back on routines that they've gotten into with screens and then lean more into play. But that quite literally is a detox. And I think that those are challenges that, some of the more challenging things that I've had to work with clients, because we are quite literally then trying to like rewire our children's brains. And that takes a lot. It takes a lot
It
of
does.
boundary setting on the parents' part. It takes a lot of work But I will also tell you that in those challenging cases that the results are some of the most amazing of the families I work with, because what happens in these homes just overall, what happens to the child's mood, their behavior, it's just incredible, the change that comes from it, but it's work. And it can be very, very difficult. And, it really requires effort. But if you put in the effort, you can see huge change.
Yeah, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that. Those two things are so, I mean, they come up in my work all the time,
Mm-hmm.
as well. That that idea that it's the mirror, right? As you
Mm-hmm.
become a mom, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like the kitchen sink
Yep.
of everything you thought that you had dealt with. just
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
basically backs up on you
Yep.
and comes up and says, hey, well, there's a very small version of you now that's here to test that,
So
and is
real.
here holding a mirror.
Yeah.
And literally that person, it is almost like they're, I want to say, when I think of uh my 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 kids, I think that, like, it is me and them collaborating together to do, like,
Yes.
our work
Yes.
together.
Totally. Totally. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's definitely a huge part of my personal parenting philosophy, but with the families I work with too, I think, being able to come at things from a collaborative mindset as opposed to a controlling mindset is a complete game changer. But it also is the opposite of many people's instincts in parenting, because that is not how
Yeah.
they were parented, right? And I think for many of us, there was sort of this energy of like the adults are the ones who know, you have to show respect, you have to this, you have to that, and you're just a kid kind of thing. So this idea of like, no, we're in this as a team, and sometimes I might be the grown up and sometimes I'm wrong. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I think being open to that, or open to, like, instead of just shutting it down, well, how do we work together to solve this? Because while I might think, this is ridiculous to you, your little toddler self, this is really important in your world. How do I honor that for you, as
Hmm.
opposed to just like shutting it down to like make my life easier, right? So I think that when you come at things from that collaborative mindset, it takes a lot of self-regulation. It takes a lot of work, but I also think
Hmm.
it creates an environment at home of respect, of mutual respect. And I think it
Yeah.
builds in children this feeling of like, this is how I deserve to be spoken to. My
Hmm.
ideas matter. What I have to say matters. And I think they carry that through with them, into the world. And that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to talk about um your future vision for yourself
Yeah.
and the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
What in the next, like, year is something that, like, you're working on and planning for in your business that you are, like,
Mm,
really excited about?
such a great question. So I recently launched. Hello. Um, I recently, let's hope I'm not losing it. I recently launched a membership, a low cost monthly membership. And that was something that I had always wanted to do. Was to find, some people are looking for the one-on-one support and someone to really be with them, kind of holding their hand, walking through the trenches. And then there are other people that are looking for support, but maybe are not looking to make that investment at this time, both financially and with their time, or they can't. And I wanted to have a place of resources for families looking to, work together in all different capacities. So I started my membership, which is called the Playful Parenting Membership. And I give a play plan every month that has simple ideas for infants well through the elementary years.
I'm excited about
That,
that.
yeah, use things you have around. I write it out like a recipe. It's like, you need this, this, and this. this is how I would lay it out, go. And it just has, 15 to 20 of those ideas that you're getting every single month. And then also a class around a developmental topic, because I think it really is about both, right? It's about supporting and having foundational developmental knowledge. It's not enough to just have play ideas. You really have to put both together if you want to see more play at home, certainly to see more independent play, which we can talk more about. But that recently launched, and I'm just looking to grow it and expand
So
it
what
and
do they
add.
do? They just, sorry to interrupt, but just
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
me,
yeah.
like, what does it look like? Do they just hop on? Like, is there a
Yeah.
landing page? They
No,
log in and then
it's
there's
a
a
great
library. What is
question.
it?
Yeah,
How does
yeah,
it work?
yeah. Great question. So there's a portal. Once you join the membership, and you get access to this portal, and in the portal, you have access to the previous month's play plans. You also have the current play plan of the moment. And like I said, they drop every month. Not only do you get the PDF of that, but you also then get a video of me kind of doing what we're doing now, where I just kind of informally walk you through it, kind of tell you what you can expect, how to make the most of it, where the idea for this month's plan came from, because there's always some kind of theme that ties it together. For example, last month was play on the go. I felt like with people doing a lot of summer traveling, I'm always getting asked, like, how do I keep my kid occupied in the plane? Or what do we do in a hotel room? Right? When you don't have your
Yeah.
normal collection of stuff. So the play plan was all focused around that. And then also, me giving, like, here are a couple of my favorite travel toys for these different age groups, kind of thing. And then you also get access to the library of classes. So same kind of thing. There's a video with it. I designed them really to be digestible, because we're all busy parents, and I know what it's like to, you sign up for something that's like, I don't have time to sit there and do this workbook and do this thing. Like, I want to
Mm-hmm.
invest, but I can't. So the idea is you could sit and watch the video if that's your thing, or you could walk around while you're unloading the dishwasher and listen to it like a podcast and get that information. But they're like 15 to 20 minutes long. There, you could kind of fit it into nap time, fit it into whatever you're doing. And then I also do a live Q&A. So as part of your membership, you also have an opportunity to answer, or ask personalized questions, because the thing is, every child's unique, right? The approach cannot be one size fits all. It's part of why I like the resources I offer to be like alive and breathing, and not just like, here's a course. I wanted to have some kind of, individualized support too, because
Is
I
it
think
like
that's
with the
important.
where they can do the Q&A? Is it like you
Yeah.
send a Zoom link out, or is it like they go into a Facebook community
Yeah,
or a
it's a great
circle, or what's
question.
the
Great question. So I have a private Facebook group for the membership, and that's where I hold the lives. And the beauty of that is that if you can't make it on live, the video lives on in
rewatch?
the feed. You can ask me a question in the comments, and I'll get back to you, whatever. I'm also very accessible to the members. So if you email me something and, I missed the live, but this came up when I was doing this, and I'll get back to you. But yeah, that's really my goal, is just to expand upon it, get it in front of more people, and then just continue to offer more resources within that. And just keep growing it.
Awesome. So I have, I'm wondering what your biggest piece of like practical advice that you have
Mm,
for a work from home mom um,
yes. I'm in
that
that
needs to,
myself.
yeah,
So
that needs to occupy their,
yeah.
their toddler for a period while they're in a meeting.
Yeah. Oh gosh, such a great question. I mean, truly, Katie, that's one of the things I'm most passionate about in my work, because I'm also living it in this season. And
Yeah.
for me personally, for many of the clients I work with, this is where independent play is a lifeline. And when we talk about independent play, I just want to mention, if people are not familiar, this is not, necessarily like your child is off in another room of the house while kind of entertaining themselves for hours on end while you're doing what you need to do. I think that with practice and work, it can evolve into something that looks more like that. But really, when I think about independent play, it's just any time that your child is independently engaged in something that they enjoy without a lot of adult involvement. Now, that does not mean unsupervised, especially with you're talking about toddlers at home or even babies. But it is like we're a less direct participant in the play that's happening. And I think, many of the families that I support are looking to see more independent play at home. So if you're someone who's listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I'm caught in this cycle where I'm constantly having to entertain my child, this is for you. If you're someone who's like, I'm leaning into way more screen time than I want to, this is for you. And I think that, as a work from home parent myself, I could not run my business without my daughter's independent play skills being as strong as they are. In terms of like actionable things, there's a lot that goes into independent play. I think you can link in the show notes. I have a free guide with tips at any age that is a really great place to start if you're looking to implement more of this. But just to give people some actionable things here, I think the first thing that I would say is we have to get out of this headspace that independent play means our child is off separately from us. Many young children cannot get into their play when they don't have an adult caregiver within close proximity. And I think that's really important to remember. So often, especially at the beginning, but even for me now, honestly, and my daughter is like a seasoned independent player, often that looks like our child is a couple of feet away from us while we're in our home office doing some stuff on the computer. They're set up on the floor with something nearby, right? Or maybe we're taking our computer into their playroom and we're still setting a very clear expectation of right now it's mama's work time. Have to do this, this, and this. And this is your work time, which is your play. Your play is your work. And when I'm done with blah, 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 right? So we're setting very clear boundaries around this because time is very confusing to young children. They live in the here and now. So when we say you have to go play, go play, right? It's like forever, right? To them, right? Like, when will you play with me again? Right. So we take that for granted sometimes. That's why tools like visual timers that make it really clear when the
I love
blue
that suggestion.
disappears, right? The blue disappears. That's when mama can come and sit down on the floor with you, or
I
something
love
that
that you
makes
said
it
that.
tangible, right? Like, or I'm going to set a timer, or we can set a timer together, or whatever it is, something that makes it tangible. But I think so making it tangible and more understood and having clear boundaries and letting them be nearby, so key and such a piece that is often missed. The other major piece, and I could go on, but just as we give like a couple of things to get you started, is we talked about connection and other ways to connect outside of play. Our child's cup really needs to be filled if we want them to then go off and play by themselves, for most children anyway. And it kind of makes sense, right? We're all human beings. We're looking and we're craving connection with the people we love. So I always say, we want to make sure that we're having pockets of connection happening in advance of whenever this time is that you're looking to have them engage on their own. So this might mean you go for a walk together, no phones, just even 10 minutes, really giving your undivided attention. And then when we come back, this is when you're going to play and I'm going to do a little bit of my work. Or maybe, we just cooked together and, we had this time where we were preparing something, the two of us, and we're really in it together. And now that that's in the oven, now we're going to go do this, whatever it looks like, but really making sure that we are giving moments of connection leading up to this. We can't, expect that our child is going to go off and play on their own if they are feeling like they, and are craving that connection. So we really want
No,
to fill that up,
that's for sure. I know my daughter is also like, she's 3, but she's still a seasoned independent player.
Mhm.
She's that girl. So
Mhm.
my daughter, she makes announcements. So what she does is she will be like, I am going to take my baby and we are going to go to bed now. She's going to do bedtime with baby. And so that means that she's going in
Yeah.
the baby, what she considers the baby's room, with the
Yes.
baby and she is doing bedtime with baby. Like, she's got the noise machine going, her own little, the baby has a noise machine. Like, the baby's got its own thing going on, and like, she's putting her babies to bed. She's got like 6 babies. She takes care of them all. They all have their own little routine. She wants to change their
Love that.
diapers. She's like her own, like, this is, I'm their mommy and I'm going
Yes.
to now go take care of them. When I'm
Yes.
finished taking care of my babies, I'll be back. And that's not for her. That's just like, okay, I have these series of activities in her mind that she's
Yes.
identified she's got to go do.
Yes.
And I'll be
Yes.
back to you, mommy, when I'm finished with that.
But it also is showing me, Katie, that you have spoken to her in this way and have
Yeah.
modeled some of this. So now she is used to that communication and now is like using that communication back to you. And I think
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
else that you like said that really made me think, another piece with independent play, and part of why, again, I started my membership is like, some children are really great naturally at guiding themselves. Some are. Some of this is like a personality and a temperament thing.
Hmm.
And some need a little more support, but every child can become great at playing independently. I see it constantly. I know it to be
Hmm.
true. So I think sometimes they just need a little prompting. It's like when you, I don't know, this is like maybe a funny example, but I feel like you'll understand it. Like if I'm really hungry, and I walk into the pantry, it's like I know I like a lot of these foods, but I'm so hungry I like can't think of what I want. I think
Yeah.
that like for our children, like they have all these things around that they enjoy, but that's a little different than self-directing in the moment. So sometimes it's just about us putting out something next to something else, and it's just enough to get them started. Or, I know sometimes a part of my membership is like giving them that little spark, right? And then they
Hmm.
take it from there. So I
They run
think
with it.
yeah. And then what starts to happen is then they start to prompt themselves, right? Over
Hmm.
time. It's like you kind of start giving them that support, and then they need less and less of it because they start to self direct more and more. But I think
Yeah.
that we often think that like every child just can do this, and they can, but sometimes they need a little something to get them going. And that's where we can come in and support them.
I think like you said, it's just about fostering that like relationship with them
Yes.
and helping
Yes.
them. It's prompting them first and then helping them later. They're in a position where they can almost prompt themselves. They're like, this is
Exactly
what I'm
right.
doing now. This is,
Exactly right.
so that's,
Exactly.
I definitely, yeah. I love the
Exactly.
independent play. Ever since I read Bringing Up Baby, which we talked about earlier,
Yeah. Yeah.
I started out Declan that way. So he has
Yeah.
always been an independent player his whole
Yep.
life. He just that's how we started. And so now also his sister also follows in his footsteps, right? Because she
Hmm.
sees, oh,
Hmm.
he does this independently,
Yes.
and they are,
Yes.
doing that together. And then,
Totally.
it's really
Totally.
cool to watch that.
It is. Yeah. And I love how like you, and I can tell like you kind of see it this way, but I feel like there's a lot you mentioned earlier about guilt and,
Yeah.
people feel neglectful. And I think if we can reframe that and look at this as like, this is actually a gift that we're giving to our children. Yes, in many ways, it also is a gift for us as parents because you do need that time to fulfill your own needs, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe
Yeah.
that's working, maybe that's some
And
other
it makes
self-care,
you a
maybe
better
it's rest.
parent.
100%. But I think we can also look at it like, and we're benefiting them incredibly, by giving them these opportunities to be creative, to problem solve,
Yeah.
to figure things out
Be
and have a
independent
space for
thinkers.
their own ideas. Yes, it translates to independence across so many other areas, not just play. And I think if we can look at it like that and reframe it, it feels less like neglect and more like this is a gift. This is a gift that I
I
get to give them.
and I remember the word just neglect and guilt, those two words were very like apart. Like when I first started with Declan, I remember people being like, you're not going to play with them right now. He doesn't need me to play with him
Hmm.
all the time. And
Hmm.
in fact, he doesn't want me to play with him all
That's
the
right.
time.
That's
And
right.
he is actually um, in love with the time that he has with himself to explore on his own
Yes,
without me saying, oh, what about this game? And what about this? And,
that's right.
he's taking things and
That's
he
right.
has ideas that I would never have
A
to go
hundred
with
percent.
this set of tools and
That's right.
toys. And so,
That's right.
I remember those words being thrown at me and me being like, and me and my husband having a particular conversation where it was just like, you know what? We are tuning out the noise. All of it is
Hmm.
noise. And what matters is
Hmm.
what we think and what we're
Yes,
doing. And
that's
that is
right.
the end of it.
That's
And so
right.
that's kind of how we just, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And I think that it's great for our kids. And now our daughter, years later, because there's a big gap, she's benefiting from those
Yeah.
initial decisions. So I love it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I did want to ask about before you go,
Yeah.
because we are on the verge of wrapping up, I
Yeah.
want to know if, so we have moms that are in this place. As you know, there's like the transition. You become a mom, or maybe you're a couple years into motherhood and you're realizing that, okay, you want to either, maybe you want to start your own business, or you want to transition to another type of work,
Yeah.
or you're not feeling like what you're doing from a work standpoint is a good fit. And
Yes.
maybe you're on the precipice of going after a dream, or starting your own business, or
Yeah.
looking for a new, um, you know, kind of work.
Yeah.
What would be your biggest piece of advice to a woman who's on the precipice of going after a dream or making a pivot like you did with your business?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I would say that there are, of course, difficulties and different things would come with working in this way that I do now. And, there's unpredictability and, there's all the different challenges that come up. But what can never be taken away is like waking up every day and feel like you're living in your purpose and in your passion. And that to me outweighs everything else. So I think that if you're feeling called to something different, life is too short to not feel like you're living in your purpose. And I think that to me is should always be kind of the loudest voice over all of the things of what you quote should be doing. And because it's scary to take the leap, but I think that for me outweighs everything else. And I would encourage someone, if you're feeling called to that, to listen to it. And then the other thing that comes to mind is that like there there is something for everyone out there. I always tell myself that, like, because yes, there are other people that work in the play space and the parenting space. But I also feel like your people find you,
Mm-hmm.
and you find the people that you're meant to find. And just kind of keeping that in your heart and in your head, I think allows you to continue to move forward with it, even when you're first building and kind of figuring it out. And that there's room for everyone. Right. And,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of bear that in mind too. Like, yes, maybe there are other people, but you're meant to be with and for the people that you're meant to be with and for. So I hope
Agreed.
that that's helpful advice.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I love this advice. Um, it's advice that I've also given myself. I think it's really cool to also know that once you feel aligned and like you're fulfilling your purpose, like the money will follow.
That's
And
right.
I think people really
That's right.
fixate on that, and like,
Yes.
I'll never make any money. You know
Yes.
what? The money will find you, your people will find you. It truly is. You just
It's
have
true.
to have the belief in yourself, right?
That's
To
right. No,
know
it's
that
so
you're,
true. It's so true. And I think about, like, I had kind of a forced pivot, like with the
yeah.
pandemic, but I think about it a lot about how, I don't know when and if the push would have happened to take Jilly Beans, like, and really go with it, or if it always would have been this kind of side hustle to my teaching in the classroom, because being in the classroom was safe, right?
Safe. Yeah.
I knew my salary, I knew my benefits, I knew what my schedule was going to be. And it was, I was kind of able to do both. So I was kind of doing both. And I'd been teetering on that for a really long time. And I don't know what would have helped me, especially then becoming pregnant, which made it scarier to then take
Hmm.
a risk like that. I don't know what would have gotten me there had I not kind of gotten the push from the universe. So,
Yeah.
but I'm so grateful I did. So I feel like if you're hearing this and kind of thinking about of giving yourself the push, like that, if you just go for it, like it will come, and you just have to trust. And if you really keep showing up and keep living in your purpose, it happens.
Absolutely. Well, Jill, thank you so much for stopping in with me and having this beautiful conversation. I know that people are truly going to benefit from the words that we've exchanged here today. I think There's been a lot of really solid, amazing advice given. So I think people have a lot of really good guidance from you here in this conversation, and they can definitely follow up with you, which I will be listing your links. If you want to give a shout out to your Instagram, tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at JillyBeansNYC. And then to learn about coaching, the membership, my podcast, all that good stuff, my website, www.jillybeansnyc.com. That's also where you can find the free guide to independent play at any age as well.
Which I have, which is amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
I will say. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Jill.
Thank you.